Journalists chronicle the world in the so-called first draft of history. Today's guest is helping lead one of America's great newspapers as it tells the story of President Trump's second administration, with a particular focus on its impact on the world of business and finance. He's Michael Corkery this week on Story in the Public Square. Hello and welcome to Story in the Public Square, where storytelling meets public affairs. I'm Jim Ludis from the Pell Center at Salve Regina University.
And I'm G. Wayne Miller, also with Salve's Pell Center.
And our guest this week is Michael Corkery, a distinguished veteran journalist who now serves as finance editor of the New York Times. He joins us today from New York. Michael, it's so great to see you again.
Nice to see you, Jim. Nice to see you, Wayne.
Yes.
You were one of our first guests on the show way back in 2017, and it feels like a few things have happened since then. But we are, 6 months or so into the first year of the second term of the Trump presidency, and this has been a chaotic time, I think, in the world of finance. Do you want to give us just a quick overview to begin the conversation about where have things come in the world of finance in the first several months of the Trump presidency?
Yeah, chaotic is a good word for it. I think when, Donald Trump was reelected in November, the financial markets and Wall Street were quite excited. He was promising, as he did in his first term, to want to stimulate economic growth, to create policies that would be pro-business, all of which the markets like. He's going to cut taxes. So they were ready for, things had been booming in the markets under Biden, but they were ready for them to go even further under the second Trump administration. And then all of a sudden, Trump seemed to actually be serious about going and engaging in a trade war, and imposing sort of startlingly high sanctions on America's largest trading partners. And the markets, frankly, were shocked that he would do this and follow through. And not only with the economic ramifications it would have for business growth, for trade, for global relations. Not only did that, cause stocks to fall, but it was also just the uncertainty of it, and I think we've all watched that over the past few months. One day it's 20% tariffs, the next it's 145%. One day it's on, one day it's off. So markets can adjust to a lot of things. Stock investors, hedge funds, banks can adjust, to good times and bad times. The things they hate the most is uncertainty. And that really rattled this market. At one point, it from a peak on February 19th, in just a few weeks, it fell 20%, and this is the S&P 500, and the speed and the depth with which it fell were quite startling. So things have recovered since April 2nd, when the tariffs were about to hit, but it's been quite a wild ride.
So you mentioned sort of the uncertainty that businesses are operating with, and this is the thing that I've been struggling with. Whether you're a small business owner or you're a Fortune 100 company, how do you plan? How do you do business planning? How do you plan investments in this kind of environment where there's so much uncertainty about the basic cost of doing business because your supply chains are going to be tariffed?
That's right. So it's everyone. You're exactly right, Jim. It's everyone from a small business owner that's literally just trying to figure out their balance sheet, and what it's going to cost them and how much they should then charge for what they sell, all the way up to a big investment firm that is trying with it. I mean, they have very sophisticated models but they need to know what the inputs are for that to figure out how to value a stock, how to value a company, how to know what its revenues are going to be, how to know what its profits are going to be. So when things so fundamental like the cost of goods imported from overseas, it's literally the calculations about how much they're going to cost are changing day to day. I mean, through everything into turmoil, and one of the things I think there was some, at least on Wall Street, there was a bit of a sense that the rug had been pulled out from underneath them because they thought they had figured Trump out. They thought that Trump was going to be, Trump 2.0 would be a lot like Trump 1.0, which was very good for the markets. And I think at a certain point they couldn't trust him. So yeah, it was chaos up and down the economy.
So, Michael, can you zero in on a few industries? And I'm thinking car sales, car manufacturing, retailing. Just give us a little bit about each of those and anything else that you want to in terms of large industries and where they stand now and the future, if you can.
Yeah, I mean, there's again a lot has changed. So, auto sales, they're still, imported parts are still, subjected to a 25% tariff. That's likely very much going to cause the cost of cars to go up. I think Ford has warned, it's going to cost their company over the next year $1.5 billion more. That gets passed along most likely to consumers. Electronics, there was an exception made for electronics parts coming out of China. So some of the sort of dreaded fear about iPhones spiking in cost, some of that has subsided. So it's all over the map. But again, you mentioned small businesses. You talk about Wall Street investors hating uncertainty. The economy and spending, buying a thing like a car, even going to McDonald's, which is warning people are spending less money there. When you're not sure about where things are headed and you're reading all these headlines about the stock market crashing, you pull back as an average consumer. You stop making purchases that you don't need to make. And that has a sort of domino effect, which then takes what had been a pretty solid economy heading into the second Trump administration. Job growth was still on track. Inflation was still persistent, but they had, there was some effort and some progress in bringing it down, or at least bringing it under control. But then when people and consumers, which are the driving force of the economy, when they get uncertain, they pull back, and then you're starting to get warnings about a recession coming on. So I think Trump and his advisors saw how far they kind of pushed it and have since backed off. But I think the real question over the next few months will be, was that in time? Did they back it? Did they pull back in time so that the economy can still keep going?
So one of those advisors, of course, is Elon Musk. Give us a little bit about him, where he started at the beginning of the second administration and where things stand with him now.
Elon Musk is certainly the most unusual of his, in terms of his profile of having such a top spot in the administration. He came in as the cost cutter in chief, and has really been driving a lot of the work to upend the federal government, rein in regulation, close agencies, and that is in various fits and starts. Again, from a finance perspective, investors were okay with that. I mean, they don't like regulation, much of it, and two, they do, on Wall Street there is concern about the deficit, and so I think there was broad support, to try to rein in federal spending, but Musk is it's he's a complicated person, and he speaks his mind, and it feels like he is now, you know, as that has somewhat bogged down his cost cutting in lawsuits and in the courts. It feels like he is taking less and less of a prominent role. And what has happened, at least when it comes to trade, which has really been the big issue, at least financially and economically. Some of Trump's advisors, Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, who has a very distinguished Wall Street pedigree, um, he has, I think, from what we can tell, gained more prominence and gained more of the president's ear, and has tried to, I think, rein in some of the rhetoric around the trade war, and try to calm the markets down, because they were getting very, very jittery. I mean, it got pretty. I think it was actually. I mean, I think it was Trump himself used the word squirrely to describe uh, how things were feeling, and they've since changed a lot of their tune.
Michael, let's get into a few of the stories that have been published by members of your reporting team, 7 very distinguished journalists. One of them was rivals pounce on Paul Weiss, a top law firm, after Trump's order. Give us an overview, please, of that story.
So, yes, it hasn't, as we all know, is following the news. It's not all about tariffs. There have been some other really interesting and important uh, uh, developments that have affected Wall Street as part of the second Trump administration. And a big one has been Trump's, many call it his retribution campaign on the legal industry. Uh, Trump has been, very clear that he has felt that he has been unfairly persecuted, is his word, technically prosecuted for what he did in his first term and even before that. And, in the various cases in New York and federally, and some of the lawyers that have worked on those cases, um, either officially or even in advisory roles, have come from elite law firms that spend most of their time working on mergers and acquisitions, doing corporate litigation. I mean, these are extremely well-paid lawyers. These are the Paul Weisses, the Gibson Dunns of the world, the Wilmer Hales, and Trump decided to, as he's done throughout industries, throughout government, he issued an executive order. The first one was against, the one that resulted in the story that I'm about to talk about. He was about to issue an executive order on Paul Weiss, which is a really big white shoe law firm in New York. And it essentially, the order would have barred the lawyers to that firm, and there are thousands of them, from working to represent clients before the federal government. Literally, it would not allow Paul Weiss's lawyers to go into a federal building, so federal courthouse, federal agency. So for a law firm that, if it's representing a company that's going to merge with another company, you need to be able to get into a federal building to talk to the agencies that need to, approve of that merger. I mean, that's just one way that these law firms need to do work with the federal government. It was stunning in its brazenness, what it would have restricted. And in order to avoid that restrictions, Paul Weiss cut a deal with the president, and the firm agreed to do millions of dollars worth of pro bono work for causes that the president supported, veterans, anti-Semitism. And in the middle of that turmoil, because these are law firms that are, they're highly competitive for work and to get deals and to get clients. There was an enormous pressure being put on the firm by other firms that were trying to steal away their lawyers, knowing that Paul Weiss was vulnerable at that moment to Trump and his executive order. So it was quite a moment for the legal industry.
Can you maybe put into context, we're talking about tariffs, which are a massive intervention by the federal government in the free market, or we're talking about compelling companies to produce goods in the United States rather than overseas, or we're talking about the targeting of law firms or universities. We keep going down this list. This is a fundamental shift in the function of the U.S. government in its interaction with private enterprise, isn't it?
Yes, it very much is. And I think, again, this is why I think even to corporate America and to Wall Street, why this second Trump administration is something they didn't anticipate. I mean, certainly people on the left and the Democrats have, they have lots of criticism, and it's criticism they had of Trump in the first term is the same for the second. But this is a new thing for him to attack companies and to go after companies and extract concessions from companies. It is fundamentally a different thing.
So Jim mentioned universities, and your team has written about Harvard, which has been confrontational with the Trump administration. Tell us about one of those stories. Trump officials blame the state for setting off confrontation with Harvard.
Yes. So again, similarly aggressive and different approach to trying to get a major institution to bend to his will. Trump, as he's done to a bunch of Ivy League schools, but Harvard is squarely in the crosshairs. He has threatened and pulled federal funding, hundreds of millions of dollars of it, because his administration has felt like Harvard hasn't done enough for to have combat anti-Semitism, some of the issues that were surrounding the Gaza protests, also wanting more viewpoint diversity. So basically feeling like there's not enough conservative viewpoints represented on the faculty. But the way he's sort of gone about that is to take funding away, and it's real. And so Harvard is in a tricky spot. They, on the one hand, want to stand up for academic freedom. On the other hand, they need money to function. And so there's a lot of internal debate about how to deal with this Trump administration, whether to fight, like some of the law firms have started to do, or to seek a deal. And we, from our finance perspective, a big voice in that are the big donors that give lots of money to Harvard. And sort of many of those donors felt like it's better to do a deal with Trump than it is to fight. And so we captured that in our piece.
Yeah, it's a vexing question, and the example of Colombia stands in contrast to that approach, right? One of the questions that I keep coming back to is there a method to the madness? So we talk about this chaos, we talk about these unprecedented interventions into the marketplace. Is there a theory of the method behind it? Why is Trump taking such aggressive action in so many different fields so early in this presidency?
Well, I think, it's a good question whether there's a method. I think there is a, sort of shock and awe aspect to it that if, just from as you guys can appreciate the trying to even keep up with the news. Right. Every day there's something new. It does keep all of these different industries, institutions, political constituencies, it keeps them on their heels because there's just every, there's always something new. And so I think that is part of the strategy is just, again, to just kind of shock the system. And, again, even with trade, you want to keep your counterparty, the countries you're negotiating with, to keep them, um, on their heels. Like that's part of how you negotiate a deal that's favorable. But again, there are consequences to that kind of strategy, and you're seeing that. You saw that with the stock market reacting the way it did, and now the economic consequences of that. It creates a lot of uncertainty, and so I think that's what the consequence is of Trump's shock and awe campaign,
Yeah.
to try to change things and bend them to his agenda.
So we're taping this in the second week of May. Just the day before we were here, the President of the United States met with the newly elected Prime Minister of Canada, one of America's most important trading relationships. Whether we're talking about just a trade in the Americas, with the Canadians and with Mexico, what is the future? What can American businesses expect about those very important relationships, whether we're talking about markets or suppliers of raw materials?
Well, I think again, I what it seems like in the past, again, Trump, when tariffs were about to take hold April 2nd, and the stock market was crashing, the bond market, which actually ended up being kind of the deciding factor in his decision to pull back, was also in turmoil. Yields were spiking. I mean, the thing. I mean, stocks are important. Everybody kind of watches it because of their 401k, and it's see the S&P go up and down. But the bond market and interest rates, that's the lifeblood of the economy. That's how companies fund themselves. That's how mortgage rates are set. So when the yields on sort of very, very, staid vanilla treasuries started going up at an alarming rate, that's when his advisors pulled him back from the brink, and he put that 90-day pause on most tariffs. So it really signaled at that moment that, like, when there's real damage that's potentially could result from tariffs, he seems willing to blink. So yes, like, his tough talk continues with the likes of Canada and China, but we'll have to see how it actually plays out. Like, if there is real hurt, if there is real examples in the data, economic data, of consumer slowdown, retail sales going down, job losses, you may see a different tune. Him singing a different tune than his tough talk now with the likes of Canada.
So we just have just about 1 minute left here, Michael. So very quickly, talk about your work day. It seems like you're very busy.
How do you stay on top of it?
I mean, you're editing and managing, or working with 7 reporters, and talk about your day. I mean, it just hearing about it, and I've known you for a very long time, makes me tired. Just thinking about it.
And it's great to be always to talk to you, Wayne, and to you, Jim. But Wayne, you and I, we do go a long way back to our days at the Providence Journal.
Yeah.
The news, certainly, we didn't have a president like Trump back then in the 90s. That makes an enormous amount of news. But we also didn't. I mean, the news business is just different too. And yes, the New York Times still has a print newspaper, but this is a 24-hour news operation. And so, at midnight, let's say at midnight on a Tuesday, I'll know what the Asian markets are up to because they're opening, and I'll wake up and around 6 a.m. and I'll know what the markets are doing in Europe. and then by 9, as the markets are about to open in the U.S., we're fully engaged, and my markets reporters are on the latest developments. And then, many of my really great team is just out talking to folks on Wall Street, and finding out what's actually going on, who's winning, who's losing, who's lobbying behind the scenes on a lot of these policies. And I've got a few investigative reporters that have just been digging into this law firm story. Again, these law firms are core to Wall Street and to corporate America, but this is the rule of law that is really at stake in how he's gone after these firms. So they have been out, breaking great stories on that. So it's busy, but people are reading the stories. They're engaged. It does feel, I mean, this just probably goes without saying, but a lot is at stake. Never had a president like this. We've never seen, to your point, Jim, policies and an approach to governing this way. So we just got to stay on top of it. And yeah, it's busy, but it's worthwhile for sure.
It makes it hugely important work. Michael Corkery, the New York Times, thank you for being with us today. That is all the time we have this week, but if you want to know more, you can find us at pellcenter.org. He's Wayne, I'm Jim, asking you to join us again next time for more Story in the Public Square.